Hello, everyone. This is Jared Mikulek, Head of Innovation here at Polaris, and today we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite technologies from IBM, Blueworks Live. Blueworks can be used for a number of different things, but primarily we use it to capture the as-is and the to-be processes for our automation and AI initiatives. In this demo, we're going to focus on a very simple HR onboarding process. Initially, this does not look like a typical process diagram, and this is intentional. Oftentimes, we find that process diagrams and robust reporting is not going to be a great way for subject matter experts and line of business to understand what's going on in the process. However, if we can use some kind of a virtual sticky note or virtual whiteboard to capture some of the key steps and activities that are happening for the process, this is much easier to understand, and it gives us a good starting point. And we can always toggle between the different perspectives and different views of this process. So as you can see, I'm capturing some of the key milestones and some of the key activities in this process. And as we build this out, we can do this either through the keyboard shortcuts on the left-hand side in the outline view, or I can just go in and drag and drop and use the diagram itself to create the process. So admittedly, this is a very simple process, but you get the idea that we can start iterating and going in waves and adding more detail and more complexity to the process as we go. Now here's where we're going to come to one of the biggest benefits of IBM Blueworks Live, is the ability to not only see the visual two-dimensional representation, but to go one level deeper and start seeing the details behind each of these activities, such as who's responsible, what are the systems, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, what are problems, what are some policies involved, documentation, attachments, comments, etc. And if I go ahead and type HR into this box, we'll see a list of very specific terms that I can choose from. And the power here is that later I can come back and say, show me every process where HR is involved, or show me every activity where this system is touched. Now at some point, it will be very common for us to turn this virtual whiteboard view into more of a process diagram view. We can also view this as documentation, which is sort of like an SOP. So the diagram is going to have additional features such as flow lines and swim lanes, and we can see that it added a swim lane for HR because participant and swim lane are linked. So if I rename a swim lane or add a new swim lane, any activity that we drop into that swim lane will automatically update the participant name. So here we're adding two new swim lanes. I'm just going to drag and drop these onto those corresponding lanes, and now we get what we would envision as a much more realistic process. Now imagine that I need to add a step in between two other steps. In other tools, I would have to delete the line, move everything to the right, shift the milestones, add a step from the palette, and then wire it all together. Here, we can just add an activity, and then potentially remove an activity, and it just shifts everything to the right or to the left. We can also have standard process elements, such as gateways and events. So in this case, we're saying, what happens when they don't pass their background check? Do we have some follow-up? Do I end the process? Or in this case, I'll create a loop, so we keep trying until they pass, which is probably not what we would do in real life. We can also look at sub-process, which is where we have common activities or similar activities that could be grouped into a set of activities, such as review the offer, sign the offer, return the letter, and we could group those into what we call accept offer, collapse that down, and now we've simplified the diagram. Related to sub-process is a link process. This is where we have a set of activities happening behind a step, but maybe that's a process that stands on its own. So for example, ordering a new laptop, we can imagine a whole set of activities that are happening, such as approvals, purchasing, shipping, but we can also imagine that other processes might want to reference that one. So we've created a link to this process. I can follow that link and then follow the breadcrumbs back to my original process, and it's creating a relationship similar to how we have the HR relationship where we see all the processes related to HR, and now we can have this relationship with other processes. I can also add visual elements like colors and icons so that I can really know at a glance what's going on with this process. So which steps are automated, which steps are manual, and that helps me just know as I look at the process without going into too much detail what's happening within this process. Now let's add some more detail to this one process step, including what systems are involved, how long does it take, maybe some problems that are related to this step, and then what we can do is use this information to do better analysis. So in this case, I'll say it's highly manual. It's also that there are sometimes mistakes made. We can add some severity and frequency. And once I've done that, and ideally we do that for all the steps in the process, I can go to the Analyze view and do an overlay of any property that I've captured. So you can see that we've only collected a small amount of information in this detail, but in other cases, if we go through and add that information to all the process maps, This analysis is going to be very compelling and very understandable. Now lastly, we're going to talk about version control. Everything I've done so far, I've not clicked a single save button, but everything is saved in an audit trail. So I can see all of the changes over time, and you can imagine that if we have multiple people working on this over multiple days, weeks, months, and years, that this list is going to get very long. So I can also add my own manual snapshot that I can then publish. And publishing simply means that it's ready for prime time, that it's now visible to the outside world. Thanks for watching the demo. If you're interested in taking a deeper dive or even seeing how generative AI can be used with Blueworks Live to create process maps from documents, images, and even audio, please reach out and we're happy to set up a demo at your earliest convenience. Have a great day.